de preparatoria le llamamos, o sea, entre secundaria y preparatoria se hacen los 2 años. Ya de la preparatoria va uno a la universidad.
¿Y la high school ya es 18, 17 años de edad? ¿O es más
Sí.
joven?
Sí, no, yo tenía 16 años cuando me gradué, me gradué en el 1968, tenía 16 años. Se graduó uno de secundaria en 16 años y luego de 18 de la preparatoria para 18 ya ir a la universidad. Entonces, high school tiene 4 años, ¿no? Y luego middle school 2, ¿verdad? Entonces nosotros hacemos 3 y 2. 6, 3 y 2. Para completar esos mismos años. Y luego ya fui como as a foreign student a UT El Paso, ahí en el Paso.
¿Y cómo pusiste cruzar como estudiante?
Tenía local, cruzaba con local.
But you were real close. I mean, you grew up real close to the border anyway.
I grew on the border all of my life.
Yeah, but you were still considered a Mexican citizen.
Considered what?
You were born on the Mexican side.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's why I was saying I went to school up to preparatoria in the Mexican side.
And then came to UT.
And then came to the US. But I had an advantage over the other ones. When I was 9 years old, my father took us to California, and he stopped with a cousin in LA, and he didn't like, being with. There was a lot of kids, so he took us to a town next to Bakersfield, California, Lamont, California, and there was a teacher. When we got there, I didn't speak a word of English. It was like, and they threw me out and said, "Go find some furniture where we can buy furniture and buy this." And so my teacher was a military kid, and she lived in South America for many years. So she had a Spanish school, and she was glad to get me because she started getting me special. She ordered special books for me to learn English, and she would write 50 words in English, and how it was written, and then how you pronounce it, and the translation. So I was in 4th grade in Mexico, so I was like 9 years old, so I would get the 50 words every day, and just... So wow. It was 3 months in there, and then my father says, "No, I don't like how the family is raised in the States," and we went back to Mexico. But so when I got to high school, they did English as an obligated topic. I had advantage over the other kids. I had my pronunciation was already in route, and we got a teacher that was very good, and so it really helped me. So by the time I came as a foreign student, I went directly into the, like chemistry, math, and I didn't go into other subjects, but I went directly into English. And then, in a couple of years, I was fluent, and taking English as a foreign language. So that's how it came about. But I don't consider, I never had the traditional immigrant mindset of coming to the States as a dream and all that, because I was in contact with the culture all the time. A lot of our family was in New Mexico, Arizona, California, some in Colorado. Everybody on the other side. I'm the first one in the family that came this way because of my, I graduated as an engineer, electrical engineer. Went with GE, and GE assigned me to Houston. That's how I ended up here.
And then you were able to bring the rest of your family over. So let me tell you what I want to do, because I don't want to take up all your time today. And this isn't a long interview. So about an hour. I want to spend a few minutes to do some background.
Yeah.
You were very good in this because you already came up with some very good ideas on your own. I want to explore those a little bit, but so what I want to do, and the reason why I'm recording it, again, it's very unofficial, and it's just to kind of like lay the groundwork so that we know better, maybe some avenues we can explore. And you have some things in here I want to go into. So let me go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Let me get your full name, please.
Jose Luis Jimenez Flores.
And you live here in Houston.
Yes.
Okay. But when were you born?
April 8, 1952.
And you were born where?
Mexico, in a town called El Porvenir, Distrito Bravos, Chihuahua.
Okay. And that's actually really close. Is there a Porvenir in the Texas side too?
It's real close. The bridge is called Isleta. It's right across it's actually the Fort Hancock. There's a Fort Hancock Bridge.
Okay.
It's a small hut, where they come in and out. But there was an actual bridge.
There was a big incident there in 1918, I think, where a bunch of people were murdered by U.S. Army and Texas Rangers and
I
ranchers.
didn't know about that one. Yeah.
Have you heard about it since then?
About what?
Have you heard about it since
No.
then? Okay.
No.
I was just wondering if that
Yeah.
had any influence on
No,
you
what
as a child.
had an influence is later years when it became a town where a lot of the crossing of illegal drugs and stuff like that happened.
Mhm.
They used to cross with trucks right across the bridge. No, not the bridge, the river. There was, it stopped having water, so they would
Right.
drive right through.
Right. So tell us a little bit about your family, your parents.
I come from a merchant family. My mother's father had a couple of grocery stores with a butcher shop, and one in the town where I was born, and another one on another town in between Juarez and Porvenir. So they came from the north of Chihuahua. No, not from the north, from the south, because we were in the north.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather on my father's side was born in a suburb of Chihuahua called Nombre de Dios, Chihuahua. And he was, they say he family owned a lot of land, so he sold part of what he had and came to El Porvenir and bought land. And the story goes that he never worked because he always lived off of the rental of his properties. So he was a ladies' man and drinking and being proud of his horses. And so everybody said that they didn't know why it didn't work. And then later on I learned, but he in the
This
town,
was your father's father.
This is my father's father, and I remember he gave me a piece of land close to the plaza, and I had it for I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years, and then a committee from the school came and asked me for the lot, so they wanted to expand the school that was there. And I talked to my father and I said, what do I do? And he said, it's your land. It was given to you by my father. You do whatever you want. So I did donate it to the, and I became a privileged son of the town because of that. I'm in the history of the town because of that. And my grandmother on my father's side, she was one of the original founders of the town. So the family was there, and that's where on my mother's side, my grandfather came from. It was called La Cruz, Chihuahua. That's where they came from. Actually, my grandmother that I mentioned on my father's side came from a town called Cuchillo Parado, Chihuahua. It's like between Ojinaga and Chihuahua. So a lot of the family is from there. And I grew up with, there was a very, very white side of the family, Spanish, blue-eyed, white hair, and then there was a very dark side of the family on my mother's side. My great-grandmother was Romanita Calamaco, and she was, I don't know what tribe, but she was part indigenous and very, very dark. And she was married to my great-grandfather, Everardo Flores, who was also very white. So in our family, we have family with blue eyes and green eyes, very white, and then we have the dark ones also, you know, so it's there. So, but I was born in El Porvenir, and when I was 3 years old, we moved to Juarez. So we moved to a suburb called San Lorenzo. We were about, back in those days, maybe 3-4 miles from downtown. Now it's all one. The suburbs have become one of Juarez, but that's where I grew up up until I started in college. My first year, I used to ride 3 buses from downtown Juarez to the University of El Paso, and then after 1 year, my grandmother got a place in an elderly community, and I went to live with her for the rest until 1 year before I graduated. When I got married, 1 year before I graduated from college.
So let me go back a little bit. You say your family had stores and grocery stores and meat markets. Did you ever work in any of this? Did you have any background in business?
No, I know, you know, I was very influenced by that because my grandmother, their house was right in front of the school, and she always had a puesto, you know, just she sold raspas and waters and candy, and since I was, she always had, and my grandfather had the store, but I never worked in those. We would just visit and eat. They also had a restaurant for a number of years, so we used to go eat and eat candy and raspas and all that, but I never worked in that.
What did your father do?
Originally he was a baker. His story was that there was 3 brothers from my father's side. He had 2 brothers and him, but one of them died young. I never met him. At times I even thought it was just them 2, and then I remember that there was one that died young. But my oldest uncle told my father, because my grandfather used to drink and abuse my grandmother, and so my older uncle told him, I said, you gotta stay here and take care, you know, make sure our father doesn't abuse mother, but then I'll send you your bicycle and blue jeans every year, but you gotta stay in town. So for those years that he did stay, he went to work with a baker. And he said in the beginning he had to, because the baker was very strict, that he had to be there at 3 o'clock in the morning. And he would go sleep under the baker's table, you know, so that he could get up at 3. And he was a very good baker, and you know, he was. But when he moved to Juarez, he got into construction because he didn't need. His story was that, you know, they had those big ovens with mesquite leña and all that, and he said, you know, they affected his eyes. So he got into construction, and he became a concrete finisher. That's what he did all his life.
So let's talk a little bit about school. You said you started school in Mexico, and you went to school in Mexico your whole life, or most of your life.
Yeah,
right?
up until 18.
So what school did you go to?
It was the first one was 21. The elementary was 21 de Marzo until I was in 4th grade, and then the last 2 I moved to a better school, Venustiano Carranza. This one wasn't. The first one was in our suburb, and the second one was downtown Juarez. Emilio Carranza is my elementary, and then I went to. It's called Secundaria Federal Número 1. Back in my days, the federal schools were very good. That was a school to go to, and you know, I had very good grades, so I went to that school. And then in my mind, education was a vehicle. So I became very, you know, I paid a lot of attention to that. So I'm one of the ones in history that has hundreds in all 3 years. And so when I graduated with honors and all that stuff, and I was president of the high school. And then the preparatoria, which was the next 2 years, it was going to be in the same building, but right at that time, that's when Johnson released the Chamizal in El Paso. And there was a high school there that became Preparatoria Federal Número Uno. And that's where I went to the last 2 years to that school. We're the first generation from El Chamizal. And then after that, I wanted to go to Tecnológico de Monterrey. That was most Mexicans that want to study at Tecnológico de Monterrey. But I talked to my father and he said, I can't do it, I have no money. I think by then there was like 8 of us. We ended up being 11. And 10 brothers and sisters and me. And when I talked to him, he said, oh, you can stay here, go to, because I had been talking about UT El Paso. He said, go to UT El Paso, you don't have to work, I'll support you, go to school, but the Tecnológico de Monterrey won't work. And I had a resentment about him not supporting me because I knew I had to work. But talking to some friends and all, what they said, because I told them, I said, all I wanted was moral support. And a friend of mine says, but did you ask him? Did you tell him that? I said, no. Okay, well then, off with a resentment. And I said, because he asked me, said, well, what do you think he would have done? I said, I would have said, yeah. Go over there, if you want to go over there and you work and you understand that I can't support you all the way, he would have said yes. And so I had to erase all that and move forward. But before all of that was a very important period because I had a girlfriend that there still are a chain of furniture stores, Mueblerías Villarreal. They're now all over the country. Back then they were in Chihuahua. And her mother got me a scholarship with them for Tecnológico de Monterrey. But when I went for the interview, they said, no, you gotta be in Tecnológico de Juárez for 1 year, and then if you then you go over there. And our school was always in conflict with their school. Every time we met with Tecnológico de Monterrey, there would be scuffles instead of, on the desfiles. So I wasn't going to go to there, because, my school was not in line with that. So, and I said, if they don't send me to Monterrey right away, I said, I'm going to go to El Paso. So, and at that time, the Mexican government had 10 scholarships in UT El Paso, and the only way you would get one is if somebody graduated or didn't make the grades. So I made my application, and the deadline came, and I didn't get it. But I had gone to Los Angeles to work for the summer to raise the money, and I didn't have papers then, but back then I used to freely. And so I went to Los Angeles, raised some money, and that's how I did every summer, because I had an aunt that would lend me money, and then I work in the summers and pay him back. But what ended up happening is after the deadline for the scholarships, I got the notice late, like a month later, that I did get the scholarship. So I went to school on a Mexican government scholarship for all 4 years. It was like $400 a semester, and that was enough. That was enough to. I think probably didn't have enough for a book or two, but that covered tuition, books, and everything. Mm-hmm. And so I went to UT El Paso. I ended up there doing electrical engineering.
So let me go back a little bit. You had said earlier, right before we got started, that you had learned English because you had come to the United States and gone to school here for a little while. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a very happy but sad experience at the same time, because when my father, I know today that he didn't just snap and say we're going to the States. Mm-hmm. He had been mulling over it, and I remember, the family, because there was a bunch of us, and the family was always pushing them to, to go in the summer and to pick cotton or whatever it was, and he never went. He said, "No, I'm never going to do that to the family." And then one day he said, "No, we're going to move to California," and he had a cousin of his was they were one and the same. And we got to his house, and we only stayed there for a couple of weeks because the oldest son of his cousin, he was in the Golden Gloves, and his father used to spar, do sparring with him, and my father didn't like that. He said, even if it's for sport, you can't let a kid be hitting, because the kid was good, and he would get with his father on the fights, for real, and then my father didn't like that. But there was another issue, and I think it's important. That cousin was going to marry my mother, and when the cousin came to the States to raise some money to marry her, my father took her. So that's why I also think he didn't want to be there, because he was jealous. And I didn't learn that until I was doing a project in my master's school over ethnic identity. And that was the question: find out how everything was, what does the environment when your father and mother got married. So I asked them, I asked my mother, and she said, "Ask your father." And then I asked my father, "Ask your mother," until they got together. And they told me, I didn't know that my mother was going to marry that cousin. And so we ended up, we moved further north to Lamont, California, next to Bakersfield. But it was a very good story for me, because that teacher just took me in and made me feel welcome and attended, and she was teaching me English, and she asked me, she says, what kind of sport do you like? And I said, baseball. I said, okay, I have this friend that has a little league team, and he's a coach, and he's gonna get in touch with you so that you can go play little league. And one day a police car shows up at the house looking for me, and I didn't know. I got really scared. And he said, "Why is he looking for me?" Well, it was a coach. He came to talk to me so that he could get me set up to play little league. So it was. I was into it. We stayed there like 3-4 months, but I was already at home. And then one day my father said, "No, we're going back."
So were you ever in trouble as a kid? The police really would be looking for you? Okay.
No, no, I was pretty dedicated to studying and behaving, and I never had the streak.
And it sounds like your dad didn't encourage that either. He didn't like fighting, and
no, I knew a father up until 6-7 years old that didn't drink. He was all sports. In the small town, he played baseball, he played basketball, and he was a cyclist. I mean, he did everything. So in my first 6-7 years, that's what it was. And then he started drinking, and that went away. And so it started a period of a lot of uncertainty, because he had a way of, he started drinking and got into heavy drinking pretty quick. And whenever he wanted to leave a job, my mother would say, "Your father's going to leave the job." And I said, "Well, how do you know?" He said, "Look," he started talking about, the supervisor doesn't know anything. I know more than him. And sure enough, a week or two later, he would leave the job. But the problem was that he wouldn't tell us. He would just disappear. And then call from LA, "Okay, I'm over here now. I got a job now, so I'll send you some money," and all that. So but he never had problems with the law or anything until later in the years. Excuse me.
Can you put this in the fridge?
Yeah, that's good.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm gonna throw this away. Got anything you want me to throw?
No, let me keep it. All right.
Estoy en la entrevista con Arturo. Bye. That's my oldest son. He was wondering where I was going into. So my father was a heavy drinker. He died at 60 of cancer, but he didn't have problems with the law or anything. He was pretty well behaved until his later years.
You said here in the notes that was one of the things that affected you most, because he started when you were about 6 years old.
Yeah.
And do you know why he started drinking so much?
I think what I know today, he had a pretty hard childhood.
Mm-hmm.
13 years old and having to carry the burden of confronting my grandfather with a violent drunk. And
so and then do you think that his dad was, because his dad was also an alcoholic, that influenced him?
yeah, and I remember experiences where one time my grandfather was in our house in Juarez, and he was drunk, and he pulled us out to the back of the house, my father and me, and he started chastising my father in front of me. And he said, because he said, well, he was telling him that how could he be so dumb of letting me waste my time in school and not putting me to work when he had so many kids and he needed help and all that. So my grandfather was old school, and my father didn't say a word. He went through my father didn't say a word, and all he told me was that, he said, just leave him alone, he doesn't understand. And to me, there was like no answer at all, it was outside, because I was wondering why doesn't he stand up for me? Why doesn't he say something? And so I knew he was very affected. And also my experience in growing up, when if he was on what I call a white drunk, it was all kudos and study so you can be somebody and all this. But if he was on a black drunk, he would cuss me out and everything, and I'm sitting there wondering, why me? And my mother would do the same thing that he did with my grandfather. She would tell me, go around the block, to give it about 15 minutes and he'll go to sleep, don't worry about it. And so all of that, it was like, I was wondering at the time, what's going on. So.
Do you think he ever hurt your mother like your grandfather hurt his wife?
He attempted a couple of times, but she was taller and bigger than him, so she would, if it was the other way around, she would grab him and throw him in the bed and not let him get out of the bed.
Okay. So you say in here that one of your biggest inspirations was your aunt. This is Elena Sosa.
Yeah.
Tell why was she so important to you?
Because she was the person I knew in the whole family with the highest level of education, and I didn't even know how high it was, but she became postmaster of the town where they lived, Sunland Park, New Mexico, and just her being, she's the one that supported me. They would lend me money every time, and I paid in the summer to do. And when I graduated, I had to report with GE to Schenectady, New York, and I didn't have money to travel and go up there because they wouldn't give you any advance. GE would give you money when you showed up in their door. So she gave me an Exxon card, and I could use it on the hotels, Howard Johnson and food, and that's what I used. And so, but and she became even more an inspiration because she was killed by a drunk driver. It was, the small town, Sunland Park had a two-lane exit highway, and a guy was speeding up drunk, and there was a head-on collision. And there was when she was on her way to a funeral to Porvenir, somebody in the family had died, and that's where she was going. And she asked a couple of my older cousins that, you know, if they would go with her, and they said no, they didn't want to go. And the youngest one, who was about 12, is the one that wanted to go with her, and he got killed there too. But it was so after that, you know, I always been very grateful to her.
I'm sorry to hear about that. And your grandmother, and this is on your mother's side or your father's side?
My father's side.
Who was also-
They're both on my father's side. That aunt is my father's sister,
Okay.
and grandmother is my father's grandmother. My father's mother.
And she was living in Los Angeles?
No, she lived in El Paso.
Oh, okay. So why was she important to you?
And she became a figure, a strong figure for me because I took with her the first Greyhound bus to LA from El Paso, and she didn't know any English, and she didn't care. She would, you know, ask and do and all that. So I was amazed at how could she be so, you know, so courageous to get into a trip like that, not speaking English and taking me, you know. That for me I was 12 years old, 13 years old when she did that. And then I saw her at some point. I thought that she was a Catholic fanatic, but then when I learned more, you know, she just had a very powerful way of life with her Catholic community, and she, you know, she was always singing in the chorus and all that. And when some disaster happened in the family, she's the one that was in the middle of everybody, you know, giving strength, so that. But when I remember an incident when my aunt got killed, the other sisters learned that the funeral home wanted some clothing, and she said, "But we can't let mother know because we don't want because it was a closed casket funeral, but they wanted clothes for her." And they were worried about my grandmother, and then I was there, and she said, "Dijo, mentecatas, you know, like, well, you know, you fools, I've already been there, I saw her, I already took the clothes over there." It was like strength, and so that's why there was that combination.
One of the other things that you said that you wrote down here is that your father's drinking affected you because later on you had issues yourself with drugs and alcohol. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it was I grew up not wanting to be like my father, and not having my family go through what I went through. And so that was in education was my vehicle, and that's how it's going to be. But in 1968, in my last year of high school, I was we had a dance. Well, before that, you know, my whole idea was, you know, I'm not gonna have any of my kids live through what I lived through. That was really my motivation. I said, you know, we're not having any more of that. But when I was in 1968, so I was 16, and we were doing a dance in a Rotary salon, you know, very high end in Juarez, and because we had a lot of the rich families were in our school. That was a school to go to, and I was the president of high school, and my girlfriend was the treasurer, and so she was collecting the money in the dance. And I had my first car, and he had started smoking, and then I got an idea. I said, you know, I think I deserve to have some of that money, because you know, my car got damaged while I was doing all the propaganda for the dance and all of that. So I'll ask her for the money. And then I said, nah, but she's pretty square, she's pretty religious, I'm not gonna do that. And then I was in front of the bar of the dance hall, and the idea came to my mind, what if I have a drink? And it was rum and ginger ale. And I took the first one, and the effect got me, not the taste, not anything. It was like, I became a little more courageous of thinking, I'm gonna ask her for that. So I had the second one, and I said, I'm definitely asking for that. And I asked her, and she agreed and gave me $200. And that's the point where I said, this works, this is good. And it went against everything that I had thought, because in the next 2-3 years I had a severe drinking problem. It was like,
And you were young.
I was young, yeah. Between, I started at 16, so by 18 to 20, I drank like a horse. But it was also part of what I was carrying, because when that was happening, I used to ask myself, I said, what's going on? This was not the plan. Where did I turn left? Where did I deviate? Because I couldn't understand that. And I just went at it. And I graduated, and I married and graduated. And before graduating, I had a serious wreck when I sent the family to the hospital. But when I was in Juarez, the vehicles were not in my name, so I would have an accident with parked cars most of the time. So I used to go from downtown to my house in a very narrow street, and I would scrape cars or hit a car, and if I couldn't drive anymore, I would just leave it there. And so I did that in El Paso, and in El Paso they got me because of the parking sticker, because I did the same thing, and I was on probation for 1 year. And I remember my probation officer telling me, he said, you don't want this on your record because it's not going to look very good. Because it wasn't a DWI, it was a failure to stop and render aid. And I had an adjudicated sentence, and I never had to report it until I applied for an insurance license for the state with Jose, and that came out. And they wanted an explanation, and they had a hard time finding it in El Paso, and they were ready to give me a letter that there was no record, and then they found it, but I had an adjudicated sentence, so it didn't affect me. But that was the only time I had trouble with the law for drinking.
So you say you were also into drugs. What do you mean by that?
After that, it was alcohol for a long time. Well, I drank I drank about 15 years from, I stopped at 33.
What made you stop?
I've been sober for 40 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And so, in the last few years of drinking, I live in the north side, and most of the group there started getting into cocaine real hard. So, the last 5 years, that's where the drugs came in.
But so you stopped drinking and you turned to cocaine?
No, it was both.
Okay.
Yeah. There probably wouldn't have been cocaine if I hadn't been if I hadn't had such an alcohol problem.
Those are both very hard to give up.
Yes.
How did you give them up?
I've been a member of a 12-step program for 40 years.
Okay.
I got 40 years in September, 18th of September.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very impressive, because not a lot of people can do that. Let me go back to your you got married. So was this the same girl that that was the treasurer of the school dance?
No.
Okay, so how did you meet your wife?
Let me tell you why I didn't. Because the girl, the treasurer is the girl that got me the scholarship. Because her mother loved me. They were from Jalisco, from Guadalajara, and her mother loved me, but her father didn't like norteños, the northern guys. He just wouldn't have me, And I remember in that dance, I finally got to, that was introduced to him. But her daughter had to go to school, and they were both doctors and studied medicine in University of Guadalajara. And the mother said, I'll sponsor you at Politécnico de Guadalajara, so that you can continue with my daughter. And Nadia closed my mind and says, I don't know that I want to be committed to marry this girl. Not because of her, because I had this idea, I'm not going to get married until I travel the world. I said, I'm not doing that. But then, right at that time, I met my wife, and that was the end of the story. Everything changed. So I met her, and we were. I remember we used to be in conflict for 5 years. I was out to her, and she's a tiny person, and she said, how can you love me? Look how small I am, and look at how tall you are. And it has nothing to do with it, So we finally ended up getting married after 5 years. And she still said, we fight a lot, and I said, I've never fought with you. For me, it was a one-up mission. You win one, I win one. I said, I'm not into fighting, so
So how old were you when you got married?
22.
22, okay.
21, for 17, 21.
So whenever you went to college, you ended up at UT in El Paso, and you studied electrical field engineering, or electrical engineering, right? So how did you get involved in that career? Was that something you had been interested in, or did you learn about that in college?
What happened since high school, you choose. I was on the engineering chapter since high school. But some of our friends, when we were deciding what to study, the question was, what are you good at? Well, math, chemistry, okay, well, engineer. Who makes money? Engineers. Well, I'll be an engineer. But later in years, I only did engineering for about 5 years. Then I opened up. I had music stores here in Houston, and then tire stores. I became self-employed. I had that idea from the beginning. So one of the reasons why I resigned from General Electric is when we were in Schenectady, I wanted to travel. And when we were in Schenectady, New York, all of the services came out of Schenectady, New York, for all of South America. And I was always complaining to management that why didn't they give us some of that. And I had Mexico, and I was the only Mexican working for the company. So whenever they needed somebody, I would get my oscilloscope and my tools and hop on the plane and be in Mexico the next morning. And everybody else, I had a green card, so everybody else had to get a work visa, and they had to wait 3-4 days, and I'd be there the next day, so it was my territory. And then when I resigned, my supervisor didn't accept my resignation, and he said, I'm gonna get you a leave of absence for 2 years. You're going back to school, and that's how we're gonna deal with it. And but I kept, I had a pretty serious drinking problem. So in about a year after I resigned, they moved the overseas operations to Houston. So all the traveling, all the foreign work was going to be out of Houston. And then my supervisor called me and said, I need you back. And I was already drinking to a point where I felt ashamed of going back. And I knew I was going to be able to, the traveling and all that, and I didn't do it.
How old were you when you resigned?
26.
Wow, that's young. So you got into owning your own music store.
Yeah.
And what was the name?
The first one was La Norteña, and we started doing the flea market because what did it, back in those days, Houston the music business in Spanish was still young. And in El Paso, there was a lot of pirate 8 tracks already coming from LA they looked like the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go over there and buy it and could bring them over, and the ones that were here had the same. It was a cartoon picture, and all of the singers had the same. I said, just that alone, and that's how I started. And then we opened up a store. We had 2 stores. They were both on North Main. The second one is the one that I had the longest, was in front of the Ritz Theater. Remember, in North Main, right in front of Preuss Reyes, and what was the name of the other guy? Right in front of their office. It was a Ritz Theater, and I rented part of what used to be their office. So, and we had that, and then we moved to tires. I had a brother that was working with me that came over since he was 18, and he was working with me, and so that's how that came about.
So how long were you in the music business?
From beginning of 76 to 81.
Okay.
5 years. And we were very successful, but we drank too much by then, so we didn't. No, we didn't. I remember I got angry and disillusioned because I had back in those days we sold like $500,000 in 1978, and I was going to expand and get a loan, and so I went to the banker, and I had about $250,000 worth of stock, and I went to the banker, and he says, "But I can't let you lend you money on this." He says, "Who's Pedro Infante?" He says, "I don't know any of the music. I can't do it." And so I got pissed off, and we moved to tires.
So what tire store did you have?
It was called La Norteña, also on Houston Avenue. There's remember restaurant La Monita?
Uh-huh.
There's the next street. There used to be a park house, a real old building owned by Robert. I think his last name was Montoya, but it was Robert. He had an auto park there, and then he bought the land right across the street, and he built his own. And that's when I would say we were rent at. There's right where the auto zone is. That's where I had the store.
Okay. And so how long did you do that?
We did that until 9/11. We had the owner of the store in Fulton wanted to sell me the piece of land, and it was $80,000. And I didn't want the commitment because I knew I was already having drinking problems. I didn't want to get into that. But we moved to Airline between Parker and Little York. Right in there's a street there. I can't remember the name of the street, but it's in that area. And we rented a place, and then we had a loan from a bank up in the north side, up on 59. And there was a machine shop right on the corner, a couple of properties from where we were at, but there used to be a big motorcycle store there. I'll remember the name of the street in a minute. But the same banker had a loan with this machine shop, and the guy was in default and disappeared. And he came to us because he knew us, and he said, "If you help me with an auction, I'm going to auction all his equipment, try to get some of the money back. And if you help me with that, I'll sell you the property for the balance that he had." So we got that corner for $32,000. And my brother and I, who's also in the program, and we used to say in 20 years, there'll be a McDonald's or somebody will come by and buy that corner, and we'll be all set. But our enthusiasm for the business and our partnership got to where we weren't taking care of business, so we decided to sell the property. And I remember the day when not our corner, but where what used to be our corner is probably next, because all the other corners are taken now. And right across the street, they built a small shopping center, and so that's we were in business in the neighborhood until I still do a lot of my work in the neighborhood with businesses and construction and all that.
So now you moved into construction and consulting. Tell me a little bit about that.
Before that, when I stopped drinking, in one of our meetings, we were in a Saturday breakfast. A lot of us used to go to a Saturday breakfast, and somebody says we were talking about the work and all that, and it was a lady fellow. She said, "We just got this contract with Dieter and Company that what's in Washington, and they're carpentry, and they sell molding and a lot of construction material." She said, and about 90% of the workers are all Mexican, and they hardly any of them speak English. And she said, "You'd be ideal for that, but you already have your life set." And because I had the business, the tire business and all that, and I said, "But who told you I have my life set?" And that was my Quixote streak. He said, no, I said, I'm willing to consider it. And she said, so I interviewed, and they hired me, and I started doing focus groups right off the bat. Mm-hmm. And I worked with them as a consultant for about 5 years also. And in that time, they were doing quality consulting for process improvement and all that, the whole movement, the ISO 9000 and everything. So I got into that, and when they learned I had a bachelor's in engineering, they offered me a job permanently, because we didn't know you had a bachelor's. And so I started doing that. And they, in about a year after I was in there, the company won the national award with a piping company, an oil piping company. So the Venezuelan oil industry came to hire them to do a program, and that's where I spent the rest of the 4 years in traveling between Venezuela, Holland, and Houston to do training and project management.
Shell? Were they working with Shell?
No, it was all the purchasing arm of the Venezuelan oil industry.
Okay, but they had an office in Holland.
They had an office in The Hague. Okay. Because it was a purchasing arm just out of Houston. Mm-hmm. That's where we spent most of our time. They were purchasing $1.2 billion a year out of that back in those days. Hmm. So that prepared me, because it was a real good streak, where I was doing training, and they were also giving us a lot of education. Mm-hmm. And so that's what.
So you really did get to travel the world.
Yeah, and actually I did. I was working for them when I finished my master's in social work, because I shifted because of my involvement in recovery movement and 12-step and all that. But really, I remember a compadre of mine, we were walking in a Juarez festival, and he says, what are you doing? I said, you're an engineer, what are you doing in humanities? And I said, well, that was my calling. I just did, when I chose engineering, I just chose it because I was going to make money, and it didn't work like that.
So what do you do? You say that social work was your calling, and you got into it because of your own experiences. So what have you done with that recently, or up to what did you end up doing with that?
At first, I was going to get a alcohol and drug addiction certificate or counselor license. And back at that time, I was coordinating groups of of abuse, of sexual and physical abuse at Family Service Center. And one, my supervisor said, why are you only doing a CADAC, what it was called? Why don't you do a master's in social work? We need men, especially Hispanic men. And so she convinced me, and I did a master's in social work at the University of Houston. And I was the last generation to do. It was either community or one-on-one counseling and work. And I was the last generation, because after that they broke it into 5: gerontology, health, and stuff like that. So my plan was to be in a hospital or some counseling center. But right at that time, I got hired by my total quality management, and we had a humanities side. And I said, the business coaching is like counseling. You just don't call it that because people don't want to, you do like DPA programs and stuff like that. So that's where I did, and I ended up not staying specifically in the field, but I do a lot of coaching and consulting on the human side.
So you say that you wish you had gotten a doctor's in social work.
That was a broken dream. I started working and doing a lot of other things, but I didn't invest in myself to do it, because I started doing all this other stuff.
But you must enjoy the work. Enjoy doing.
Oh yeah, that's why I still do a lot of coaching, and I do counseling, a lot of on my own, no charge. Because and I've been very, very involved in the recovery movement.
Can we take a little break?
I'm almost done.
Okay, all right. You okay?
I'm fine.
All right.
So I asked you to fill out a couple of things here that I want to talk about here at the end. I asked you, how do you want people to remember you? And it says that as a person who was willing to face life on life's terms and contribute to others, especially people with addiction problems. What do you mean by facing life on life's terms?
There's a lot of pretense in the world. In general, we work with 2 or 3 different identities, and knowing which one is the most genuine it's very important. Because a lot of times you pretend for so many years that you're okay. Like the middle-aged burnout and things it's because you don't put your real self on the table. You have this front, and that's what addiction is all about. You have this suffering human being that pretends to be strong just so that he doesn't show that he's really weak or has, what we know from the addiction disease is that you don't get sick when you start drinking. If you start drinking and you need to, you're already sick. Or you're already in a emotional disadvantage, or with different issues of abandonment or abuse or whatever the case may be. And for the most part, we hide that. In my case, I always, I had what we call moral hangovers, because it was like I had everything to not be here. Why am I here? And I had a degree, and I knew I would face anything and wake. I learned from the beginning to, if I fell down, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna continue. But there was no sanity being brought into. I would just fight like my life was at stake, but there was no relief from all the issues that took me there. And that's why, you know, like I said, I've been very involved. I've invested myself. That's my life project. My family, because I had to do a lot of reflection, because I said, okay, so what's first? But it's not that one is more important, you know. My life, my wife, my family project is, you know, even when I was drinking and drugging, I never wanted to leave the family or drop them or not leave them on their own. But I was, you know, it's a disease, and I was taken by the disease. Like, took me for a ride for a while.
Mm-hmm. And you said if you could go back in time, what would you wish? And you said to find a mentor and learn and practice to become teachable. One mentor for material. What do you mean by that?
We usually get introduced into a very materialistic perspective of life. Like in my case, you know, my grandmother was very religious, but I got away from her 8, 9 because she would want to have me in the posadas there, representing one of the characters, and so I did it a couple of times, and then I got away from it. But I remember 20 years, my 20 years, and other young men that I've talked to. Everything is based on, you know, the truck, the boots, the house, and doing a house in Mexico, and that's why I also say, you know, what other issues to talk about is like, and that comes from, at that time it's all about the money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and sometimes you disregard family, you drop everything that you committed to in pursuing, you know, 2 or 3 jobs, and you know, the American dream is pretty materialistic, and if you don't introduce spirituality into your dream, it's very difficult. You know, I know we have a young community, and we get a lot of young people that are already pretty beaten, you know, in terms of getting into alcohol, drug, but even just uprooting ourselves from the country. Because I went to that even though I was on the border, so these guys that are further south, you know, you get uprooted for the dream, and then many of the dreams is just a life of very hard work.
So let me come back to this idea of the American dream. You said here you wanted to talk about your point of view of the American dream, and we had talked earlier, and you were saying about, you know, you have a different perspective on that because a lot of your family lived in the United States when you were growing up, and you lived so close to the border growing up. And so, what does the American dream mean to you?
I didn't see it as the American dream. It was just, you know, like I lived on the border, and I was in touch with both. I was bicultural, and because of my language, I was more bicultural than others, and you know, and I did. After I came back from California, I watched 80% English TV and 20% Spanish, and so I was always, you know, learning, and so in being here, I went through the same thing because it took me about 28 years to feel at home in Houston. It was like, you know, like something's missing, you know. And then I got divorced for 5 years and went to Florida, and I said I was 30 minutes away from South Beach. So it was like, I made it. And about 3 months I was missing Houston. And then I realized, and I said, okay, I reframed everything, and I said, I'm gonna have 2 homes, one in Houston and one in Juarez, you know. It's not like I'm not gonna have a home there, meaning just that I don't have a physical house, but that's my home. And I go over there, and you know, the energy that's there where I was born, it cannot be substituted. That's home, and then Houston is my other home. So and I started following politics lately a lot, and you know, we're seen as heroes because we send money back, but our struggle, our personal, individual, family struggle is not mentioned, is not attended to. And, you know, I spent a few years in the Spanish Contractors Association and assisting, you know, because our guys will get into being contractors with a truck and a hammer. I don't care, you know. And so I did a lot of assisting there, but it's, you know, the alcohol and the drugs is really bad in our community. Mm-hmm. And you know, if you don't get like at 20, if you don't get a mentor and you just create a dream on your own, it's most likely all about the money.
So you think it's a very materialistic dream?
Yeah.
And that sends a lot of people astray.
Yep. I remember the first time when I said, you know, this is not working. You know, there's a flea market called La Tia Pancha on Airline, and he built a corral on the bar just so the guys can be put a foot on top of the first board and show their boots and drink there all day. You know, and I know by experience, you know, that the expectations are at times inhuman, because, you know, people ask, you know, why, how can, I remember one time there was this couple and across the border from Nogales, Sonora, and there was a couple and the guy that they were interviewing the couple and the guy says, I'm not going across the desert, I don't want to die. And the girlfriend had done it 2 or 3 times. And she said, oh, it's nothing, you know, I'm going to show them how. And that, you know, people die, and people say, you know, how can they have that kind of drive? And some of the elements are inhuman, you know, like the train, the beast, you know, where people risk their lives and the border, you know, just walking the border. And mm-hmm. And I've assisted people that have, you know, a brother or somebody in the family died when they come from over there. And so that kind of, it's almost like going into a blackout and not knowing what you're getting into. Mm-hmm. And then they get here and we say, you know, creen que van a levantar el dinero con palas y nada, que son 3 trabajos. And so that's why I think, because before this last president came in, people used to ask me, say, so what do you think needs to happen for Mexico to get better? And I said, a spiritual revolution. And the guy said, no salgas con tus cosas, you know, don't come up with your thing. And I said, I'm serious. I said, because if it's an armed revolution, I said, then it's going to be pretty bad. And this last president did allow that.
So what is you talk about spiritual, are you still Catholic?
No, I'm still Catholic, but I differentiate religion from spirituality, because the religion is a methodology to achieve spirituality, and there's a lot of churches that, especially for people with addictions, the conversation for that is not there. Because, you know, pastors or priests expect, you know, we work with them all the time, you know, we go and carry the message and they call us when they have somebody, but you know, a church cannot attend to unless they have a specific house for that. But that's what's going on with that.
What about, like, you know, there's so many different types of Catholicism. There's like the Charismatic Renewal Center, and they're very spiritual. And then there's a lot of individual churches, like you were saying. Priest that, when I first came to Houston, the priest at my Catholic church, he just passed away in April. But he had gone to St. Mary's, he had gone to seminary, and then he left. He moved out to Las Vegas, and for like 20 years he was a addiction counselor. And then he ran into one of his friends from the seminary and says, "You need to come back." And so he came back to Houston, finished the seminary, and then was the priest out of my church until he died. Well, I mean, he retired, but he was there. But he was real big, and he did a lot of addiction counseling out of the church office there. But now that he's gone, I mean, I don't know that anybody's doing it.
Yeah. Which church is?
It was Saint Jerome. His name was Mike. Father Mike. God, I can't think of his last name now. Van Cleef.
Yeah. And even, you know, I did my master's with a Jesuit fraile, and he was in a mission in El Salvador, and he met a girl and dropped the the habit and did a master's in social work, and he ended up as the director for an addiction facility for priests and pastors. And because they have a lot of issues with their own.
There was a priest, young, who killed himself a couple of months ago, and they said that he had left a message or something. They said he was going through a lot of internal struggles, and you know, that's something nobody thinks about, is that it's not easy to.
Yeah. No, and we have priests that are members, and they say, you know, I'm supposed to be the God representative on earth for you and help you, you know, live a life of spirituality. And I said, I couldn't live my own life with that.
Yeah.
There was a guy in Mexico, very famous, because he asked for permission to leave, you know, the active work, and he opened up what they call the farms in Mexico, where they take addicts and give them a place to live for a year or two, train them and all that. And he's the one that did a lot of that work, but he's died already. But he said, you know, he always used to negotiate, because he was a down and out drunk, and he said, but the bishop they didn't want to let him go, and they said, okay, I'm going to send you to somewhere where you cannot harm anybody. There's more church in the mountains of Guerrero, somewhere over there. And he left, because he said, they didn't know that I went over there and formed my own group of drinkers instead of, you know, he would get even with a few parishioners, he would start his own group, but not for to stop drinking, to drink. And so, but there's a lot of work to do, but I think the Mexican government is going to start taking better care of all of us that need services, because you know, the guys that they used to send to the consulates, it was not a good scene, but it's coming.
Well, I want to thank you very much
Okay.
for all the information and for opening yourself up.
I have a few questions. And I realize this is our expert at interviewing, but I had a few questions. Like, they're stupid questions, right? What's your favorite color?
Blue.
What is your favorite food?
Chicken soup.
If you knew that tomorrow was your last day on planet and you had to eat 3 square meals today, and you could eat whatever you wanted to, what would you have for breakfast?
Okay, and then again, I didn't.
Tomorrow is your last day on that planet. You're not going to be here after tomorrow. What would you have for your breakfast, your last breakfast?
Where will be the shelves? That's 2 sunny side up eggs, one with red sauce and the other one with green sauce and beans.
Any meat?
And meat,
Any meat?
a chicken.
Little chicken with it?
Well, I shifted from, you know, I come from, I'm the grandson of a butcher, so for many years it would have been red meat. So maybe if it was my last one, yeah, not chuletas y bien.
Okay. Because you can do whatever you want. What would you have for lunch?
Chicken soup.
What would you have for supper?
Something light so that I can sleep well. So
Okay.
I would have a Caesar salad. That's my favorite.
Very good. Do you ever go to the movies?
Yes.
What is your favorite movie?
The Horseman. It was a Mark Sharif and Jack Palance, the story of some Middle Eastern tribe where he cuts his leg and has to go in exile from the tribe because he couldn't, he lost his leg in this competition where from the horses they pick up an animal from the ground and they try to take it from each other, and whoever gets it across the finish line is the winner. And he was the son of one of the greatest, and he lost his leg in one of those, and they said, you know, you're damaged goods, you can't participate anymore. So he disappeared and became so proficient even with no leg that he came and won the competition. I saw that in Juarez, I don't know, maybe 14 years of age, almost 60 years ago. And I looked for it for a long time, and now with this new technology, I found it again.
Okay. And you got to see it again?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I know you were in the music retail business. What was your favorite song?
My favorite song?
Mm-hmm.
El Rey.
El Rey. And who sang it?
Jose Alfredo Jimenez, the greatest composer before Juan Gabriel.
Okay. Your second favorite song?
El Hijo del Pueblo. That talks about. I'm very proud of having been born in the barrio and away from the rich people and this discrimination, and that's what it goes about. El Hijo del Pueblo. That's also Jose Alfredo.
What was the thing that caused you to decide to go through was it the 12 steps, or I forget what you called it?
It was an accumulation of things because I suffered from moral hangovers, and when I got there at first I thought, you know, that I felt guilty, but in time I learned that I was so disconnected that I wasn't feeling guilty. What got me down was seeing myself useless, worthless, because you know, it was like what happened. It was a sense of worthlessness, and also I was going to. It was one morning where I woke up with this fear that I knew that no amount of alcohol or cocaine was going to alleviate it. It was like, you either do something or that's it. Because I used to say in my sharings, you know, I never thought about committing suicide, but I was kissing death. I estaba dándole besitos a la muerte. It was like, it seemed more and more, it seemed attractive. It was like, because I was so exhausted that every day I started drinking, I would fall asleep. I would, you know, like somebody turned off the lights, and I was wishing not to wake up anymore. You know, I wanted it easy out. I didn't want to have a long, because I had 2 or 3 friends that ended up vegetables in a wheelchair, and it was pretty serious.
When you stopped abusing the alcohol and the drugs, was it a sudden and quick stop, or did you have to stop slowly?
I've absolutely no more. I went to a meeting one day, and this insidious that comes over, you know, needing to get intoxicated, because the attraction is for the intoxication. That you don't like who you are anymore, so you feel the drug, you move to this place, and so it was a complete stop. And we when we work with newcomers, you know, they gotta stop unless they're so bad that they gotta be in a facility to get medical attention. But if we don't provide that, but but they have to stop cold turkey.
How hard is that?
Hmm?
How hard is that?
It's very difficult. That's why, we say that many of the cantinas in the north side have more members than our group. Yeah, it's really an epidemic, but since it's legal, and also our culture, we grew up celebrating everything with alcohol.
Absolutely. Has to
So
have a toast.
it's a cultural
New Year's, Christmas, everything.
Birthdays,
yeah.
job, get fired,
Seeing a friend that you didn't see in a long time.
everything.
No, it's very difficult, but it's a life or death situation. There's no,
Mm-hmm.
some young guys, that's why I also talk about the mentor, because the program asks you to get a sponsor to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do it on your own, you'll create this concoctions of what you bring from your own way of thinking to the new one, and you make up things that you gotta have support in interpreting where you're at, because the disease tells you all the time that you don't have problems. It's the other way around. It's like we say, which disease tells you to go buy more of what's making you sick, and that's. And we worked with probation for a long time. For many years they had a lady that, would do the seminars and invite us there.
You say that that's the kind of work that you're doing right now, so do you still do the construction business?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is something you do
I'm a voluntary member.
as a freebie to society,
Yeah.
and you think you're doing good with it?
I think I've been there 40 years, and in the beginning, when they said this is a lifetime commitment for your own sanity, not you're gonna assist, but for your own sanity, because if you don't stay in the conversation, the disease creeps back up.
Okay.
That's why people can stop for a few years, and then all of a sudden they say, if everything was going great, he had everything went for himself, he's drunk again. What happened? He got out of the conversation. That's where spirituality comes in, where you gotta shift to and understand that you may have the biggest house and 3 cars, and you have a family. If you have a son that has problems with alcohol, or somebody in the family, or things come up, and if you leave, you want people to do it like you did. And there's a lot of people that stop cold turkey and they don't drink again. But if they have somebody close to them that has a problem, they want to impose how they did it. That's why they say, ¿qué se necesita para dejar de tomar muchos huevos?
How many children did you have?
3.
Who's your oldest?
Jose Luis Jimenez.
And how was he done in his life?
He's done real good. I was fortunate to stop drinking when he was 9 years old, and then we didn't have any family for between Jose Luis and Eric. There's 11 years. So by the time I had I had a son and a daughter. It was a totally different, family environment and everything. And Jose, when he saw me do things with the other 2, he says, "Why didn't you do that with me?" I said, "Because I didn't know how." That's as simple as that. But no, we have a very open relationship, very good.
And what is Jose doing right now?
He's working for Garcia, not Garcia, Precinct 2, Adrian.
Yeah,
Garcia. Yeah. He's working for him, and he just renewed his term. Garcia renewed his term, so he stayed there.
Okay.
And I think he still has a State Farm agency, but I see him staying in civil work, because he managed to. His first experience was with the sheriff, and he was too business oriented, and it was a cop environment. Lieutenants turned managers. and he was always clashing with them, you know. There was a couple of times where they accused him of favoritism, because he opened up the small business program for Hispanics, you know, for on the food. It was all controlled by the old group, and he came in and opened it up for, you know, for kids and stuff like that. And so he stayed with Adrian. He first did Metro, small business Metro, and then we went with Adrian. Then he got into the insurance business, and when Adrian got elected, called him back 10 years later. And I see him staying there, I think, you know, because he managed to do enough of how he likes to do things, you know, for improvement of many projects, to bring in the business perspective, you know, so that, because, you know, in civil work, there's a lot of stuff that has been untouched for 25 years, and they say, why do you do this like that? And, well, Peter used to do it like that. Where's Peter? He retired 20 years ago. So why are you still doing it? You know, they're comfortable, you know, they normalize the levels of quality that need to be looked at, and Jose is very good at that. And I told him, you just gotta be okay, we're not being very popular.
You got any grandchildren from Jose?
Two. Jasmine, who was in UT Austin, and Jose Mariano Jimenez. And I remember my wife didn't like the second name, and because she wanted a more sophisticated. Mariano was. And
Excuse me.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. I hate to interrupt. The white truck out here in the front, I just need to pull out.
oh, that's mine.
Okay, are we through? I think we covered a lot, but this is not the interview.
No,
So
This is just to see where you're. Do you know who John of the Cross was?
yeah,
1500s. Spanish priest. He said, intellect, will, and feelings. He goes, when they're not spiritually filled, we fill them with things from other things to fill those. And it reminded me a lot of what you were saying about addiction.
and that's the core of it. There's a spiritual vacuum that you try to fill it like that, and